15 California cities posted housing price gains in 2026 while the broader state market declined, protected by structural factors including constrained supply, cash buyer concentration, military land ownership, corporate land control, and legislative growth restrictions that limit the mechanisms through which housing market downturns typically spread. Let's start by understanding what actually causes housing price declines, because once you understand the mechanism, you understand why certain markets are resistant to it. Housing crashes travel primarily through debt. Interest rates rise, monthly payments increase beyond what buyers can sustain, stretched owners are forced to sell, supply increases, prices fall, and that dynamic spreads through neighborhoods as each distressed sale sets a new comparable price point for the next transaction. The markets on this list are resistant to that mechanism for specific, identifiable structural reasons, primarily because they control their own supply, serve buyers who don't need. Number 15 is Arcadia, and the protection factor here fits in one word: cash. Arcadia is in Los Angeles County between Pasadena and the San Gabriel Mountains, and its school district has spent 4 decades pulling in wealthy international families who purchase homes outright. No loan, no lender, which means the mechanism that drives prices down elsewhere, rising rates making payments unaffordable and forcing sales, has nothing to grip here. When rates rise and banks get nervous, none of that touches a buyer who never asked them for anything. Zillow shows a typical home around $1.3 million that moved up approximately 0.2% while nearly everything around it declined. That number sounds modest, but staying flat in a declining county requires more structural strength than it appears. The trade-off is that Arcadia also rarely spikes dramatically because cash buyers are patient and the high end of this market moves more slowly than it did a decade ago. Steady is the product here, not spectacular. The peacocks wandering the streets near the old Santa Anita racetrack are real, incidentally, and they behave as though they own the place, which given what the actual owners paid up front. Number 14, San Luis Obispo. There's a California city where building new housing is essentially against the law in practice. San Luis Obispo caps how many new homes can be built annually, surrounds itself with a protected greenbelt, and has voted decade after decade to stay small. Positioned halfway between Los Angeles and San Francisco in green hills and legally frozen in scale, it faces demand from Cal Poly's 20,000 students whose parents discovered that buying a condo outperforms 4 years of rent payments, from a hospital system that needs its workers housed, and from retirees arriving continuously for weather that barely has seasons. All of that demand presses against a supply ceiling written into city code. The typical home runs just over $1 million, up 0.4% through a year that pulled most of California backward, with surrounding county appreciation adding another full percent on top. A denied building permit is defended equity, and this city denies them professionally. The honest cost of that discipline doesn't land on homeowners. San Luis Obispo has become one of the least affordable small cities in America, with nurses and restaurant workers commuting in daily from Atascadero and Santa Maria, priced out of the town they staff. Fortresses don't come with fairness guarantees. That's the bargain. Number 13, San Clemente. Look at a map of San Clemente and the protection factors are immediately visible. The Pacific Wall's off the west side. Camp Pendleton, the Marine base, seals the entire southern edge of Orange County. The hills behind the beach filled in with completed neighborhoods years ago. There is nowhere left to build and there never will be. A developer named Ole Hansen planned this town in the 1920s as his Spanish village by the sea, white plaster walls and red tile roofs, and a century later his design rules hold while the land ran out. The supply of San Clemente is essentially the San Clemente that already exists. Demand never got that memo. Surfers still chase the wave at trestles on the south end, buyers keep pursuing the last stretch of coast that looks like old California, and the typical home reached approximately $1.5 million, up 0.6% in a year that pushed most of the state the other direction. One honest risk exists at the waterline. The coastal bluffs here have slipped more than once, closing the rail line beneath them, and homes right on that edge carry risk the rest of town doesn't think about. One street back from that edge, the math turns straightforward and old. A finished town behind an ocean and a marine base. Hansen drew those walls 100 years ago. They're still working. Number 12, Mission Viejo. Drive into Mission Viejo on a summer evening and the whole sales pitch is visible in one lap. Paddleboarders on a private lake the community built for its own residents. Kids biking home from schools that families relocate across the country for. Cul-de-sacs so tidy they look computer-rendered. This was one of the largest master plan communities in American history, drawn as a finished product in the 1960s, and finished is the critical word. There's no next phase coming and no raw land waiting to flood the market when conditions weaken. Supply is fixed and families keep arriving anyway. Zillow shows a typical home just over $1 million, up 0.7% this year. The detail that says everything is underneath that number. Homes in Mission Viejo go pending in approximately 9 days. 9. In a state where listings in declining markets sit for 2 or 3 months, buyers here move like the home might vanish by the weekend, because functionally it will. The criticism of Mission Viejo has always been that it's too planned. The suburb people mock right up until they calculate the school district savings. The market has never once cared about that criticism. Number 11, El Segundo. The paychecks circulating through El Segundo may be the most recession-resistant paychecks in Southern California. This town of approximately 17,000 people is pressed between LAX and the ocean, and packed inside its few square miles sit Los Angeles Air Force Base, the Aerospace Corporation, Raytheon, and Northrop Grumman, with more defense and aerospace spending concentrated in this small footprint than some entire states ever see. Defense contracts run on decade-long cycles. When engineers cashing those checks keep buying houses through whatever the broader housing market thinks it's doing, and they're buying inside a town that physically cannot add more inventory. The airport walls off the north. A refinery takes the south. The ocean closes the west. Every remaining block was built out generations ago. Zillow puts the typical home at approximately $1.7 million, up 0.9% this year in a town smaller than some high school campuses. The deal comes with conditions: jets overhead throughout the day and an oil refinery as a neighbor, which is precisely why this place stayed quiet while beach towns nearby got famous. The aerospace engineers ran the numbers on the most stable place to hold real estate in Los Angeles County, and it turned out to be walking distance from their offices. Number 10, Laguna Niguel. Laguna Niguel was born as a plan rather than a town. In 1959 it became one of California's first master plan communities, 30 square miles of coastal hills sketched on paper before most streets existed, with one consistent theme: keep it low, keep it green, keep it valuable. 60 years later, the hills between the coast and the toll road are fully developed. About a third of the city is locked as parks and open space, and there's no flat land left to build on. What remains is a wealth corridor positioned above the ocean towns below it, close enough to smell the salt air and priced meaningfully below actual beachfront. Zillow shows it up 1.4% this year, with typical homes around $1.3 million. The buyers here are doctors and defense engineers who wanted Laguna Beach and bought the hill above it instead, and every year that compromise looks smarter as beachfront pricing continues escalating beyond them. Number 9, Huntington Beach. Huntington Beach is the largest city on this list by substantial margin, nearly 200,000 people stretched along 10 miles of sand. Scale is supposed to make a market ordinary. More homes, more sellers, more pathways for prices to slip. Surf City broke that rule by finishing itself decades ago and locking the doors. Almost every buildable lot was developed generations back, and City Hall has consistently resisted large apartment projects since, which means a city of 200,000 behaves like a small beach town when it comes to supply dynamics. Zillow shows the typical home at approximately $1.3 million, up 1.8% through a declining year. The demand explanation needs no elaboration. 10 miles of beach, a pier, a downtown that fills every weekend, and whether the rest of the country watches on television in January. The honest asterisk is that oceanfront living carries oceanfront costs. Insurance isn't cheap, and environmental concerns have made national news. Buyers keep signing anyway. 10 miles of sand, no more land behind it, and prices climbing through a statewide slide. Number 8, Fountain Valley. On a Saturday morning in Fountain Valley, you'll see 3 generations unloading groceries from one driveway, and that driveway explains the market. This is a post-war suburb in the flat middle of Orange County, built out in the 1960s and 1970s, 10 minutes from the beach without the beach premium, and it has become the town where families pool resources across generations to buy one house properly. A substantial share of demand flows from the Little Saigon communities nearby, multi-generational buyers who treat home ownership as permanent family infrastructure rather than a financial instrument to trade. Permanent buyers create a market with almost no panic sellers in it. The schools attract families. Supply never grows because the city finished itself 5 decades ago. Zillow shows the typical home at approximately $1.2 million, up 1.9% this year, going pending in about 10 days. Nothing about Fountain Valley photographs particularly well. It's tract homes, wide boulevards, and a mall, the kind of place road trips pass through without noticing. The equity doesn't notice either. When buyers plan in decades and sellers barely exist, the price knows one direction. Number 7, Seal Beach. Seal Beach runs on a machine most of California forgot existed. In the early 1960s, this small town at the top of the Orange County coast opened Leisure World, one of the first large retirement communities in America, thousands of co-op homes behind a guarded gate. That single development holds a substantial share of the city's entire population today. Around it sits a small traditional beach grid with a wooden pier, and next to that sits the Naval Weapons Station, a military installation so large it accounts for most of the city's land area and guarantees that nothing meaningful will ever be built there. The result is a coastal town where supply is frozen by the Navy on one side and demand is refilled annually by retirees on the other. A pipeline of buyers that never dries because America never stops turning 65. Zillow shows a typical home at approximately $900,000, up 1.9% this year, which quietly makes Seal Beach one of the most accessible coastal addresses remaining in Orange County. The honest caveat is that much of what's affordable here is age-restricted. The discount comes with a birthday requirement. The golf carts on Seal Beach Boulevard aren't a novelty. They're the local economy, rolling past the pier on a Tuesday morning like the housing correction was something that happened somewhere else entirely. Number 6, Coronado. Coronado is an island in every way that practically matters. It sits across the bay from San Diego, reachable by exactly one bridge and one long sand spit, and you cannot manufacture more of it. A third of the land belongs to Naval Air Station North Island. The Victorian landmark of Hotel del Coronado anchors the beach, and the remaining street grid was completed long before anyone currently buying houses was born. Zillow prices the typical home at approximately $2.4 million, up 1.9% through a year that pulled the rest of San Diego County downward. The reason is almost insultingly straightforward. Every mechanism that pushes prices lower needs new supply or nervous sellers to work with. Coronado has neither. Admirals retire here. Families hold properties for 50 years and pass them down. The few homes that do list get competed over by buyers who have often waited years for a specific street to become available. There's no counterargument to an island with no room to grow and no owners who need to sell. Number 5, one company decides how many homes exist in Irvine. Not a zoning board, not the market, a single corporation. The Irvine Company inherited a Spanish land grant ranch nearly the size of a small county, drew a master-planned city on it in the 1960s, and has spent 6 decades releasing land the way a careful jeweler releases inventory, one carefully priced allocation at a time. When demand cools, the release slows and the market simply never floods. Layer the demand side on top of that supply control. The schools rank among the best in America and attract families from across the Pacific, many paying cash that no interest rate can discourage. The Spectrum Business District keeps tens of thousands of high-wage earners inside city limits. Zillow shows a typical home at approximately $1.3 million, up 2.1% this year, going pending in about 12 days in a city of over 300,000 people. That last detail deserves attention. Fortresses are supposed to be small. Irvine is a fortress the scale of a metropolitan area. The toll for living inside it is real, association fees, special assessments on newer villages, and the knowledge that your land ultimately belongs to a corporation with a longer time horizon than your mortgage. Buyers pay the toll anyway. 12 days, 300,000 residents, one supplier. Number 4, Dana Point. For decades, Dana Point was the overlooked town between Laguna Beach and San Clemente that visitors drove past without stopping. Then the money looked at the maps carefully and noticed what was always there. A protected harbor, bluffs on 3 sides, 2 of the most expensive resort properties on the west coast sitting above the sand, and a strictly finite number of homes with no room for additional development. The town spent recent years investing heavily in harbor renovation. The Lantern District received a significant facelift. The typical home now runs approximately $1.7 million, up 3.6% on Zillow in 12 months, one of the largest documented gains anywhere in the state during this period. That's what happens when luxury demand concentrates on supply that cannot respond. Whale-watching boats sell out every winter. Same product every year, same full boats. The housing market here operates on the identical principle. Number 3, Palos Verdes Estates. 2 cities share the same green peninsula above the same ocean. This year one of them rose 5% while the other physically sank. Rancho Palos Verdes next door is fighting an active landslide with ground moving under whole neighborhoods, utilities severed to the worst streets, and values down. Palos Verdes Estates, on the stable side of that same hill, was up 5% to approximately $2.7 million. The difference between the two comes down to a century-old piece of planning. This city was drawn in the early 1920s by the Olmsted brothers, the family that designed Central Park, as one of the first fully planned communities in America, and it came with deed restrictions and design oversight that never expired. A design board has been telling homeowners no since the 1920s. No towers, no subdividing, nothing that changes the character of the tree-lined bluffs. Which is why the place looks fundamentally unchanged from when the plan was originally drafted. You're not buying a house here so much as a permanent seat inside a finished landscape. The land is stable, the rules are written into the deeds, the supply is constrained by covenants rather than luck, and this year the market paid 5. Number 2, Cypress. Cypress is the runner-up and it happened in the most affordable city on this entire list. Cypress sits in the flat northwest corner of Orange County, a post-war grid of modest tract homes that started life as dairy farms. The typical home here costs approximately $965,000, which by the standards of this countdown is the entry level. So why did it jump harder than the beach towns? Schools. One word explains the entire market. Cypress feeds into some of the most sought-after public schools in the state, including Oxford Academy, which ranks among the best campuses nationally. Families have identified the arbitrage. The same academic outcomes that cost $2 million behind a coastal zip code cost roughly half that on a quiet Cypress street. Every spring the bidding wars arrive with the reliability of a seasonal clock. There's no ocean here, no harbor, no hills, nothing that photographs particularly well as a destination. That's precisely the lesson this city teaches. Scarcity doesn't need to be beautiful. A seat in the right classroom is as finite as beachfront, and the market prices it with exactly the same ruthlessness. The dairy farmers sold their pastures 60 years ago. Those pastures appreciated 7.1. And number 1, Newport Beach. The top spot belongs to the most expensive market in California, which is precisely backwards from how a market downturn is supposed to work. The typical Newport Beach home now costs approximately $3.7 million, and over the past year, while the state slid backward and markets that had seemed strong gave up significant value, Newport Beach rose 9.8%. Nearly 10%. The strongest verified gain of any city on this list, posted by the most expensive one. The mechanism explains itself once you see it clearly. Housing crashes travel through debt. Rates rise, payments break, stretched owners are forced to sell, and the dominoes fall down the street. In Newport Beach, an enormous share of purchases close entirely in cash. No lender in the room at all. When nobody needs a mortgage, mortgage rates have nothing to grip. The crash's primary delivery mechanism simply doesn't reach this zip code. The demand structure compounds the protection. Balboa Island cottages held by third-generation owners. Corona del Mar lots rebuilt larger every decade. Harbor slips worth more than most American houses. Buyers who made fortunes elsewhere and treat a Newport address as a permanent holding rather than a trade. Bad years don't force these owners to list. They simply stop listing, supply effectively evaporates, and the few transactions that do occur set new records. That's 9.8% in a declining market. So those are 15 California cities that held or gained value in 2026 while the broader state declined. Pull the whole list into one observation. The towns that held while California fell all controlled their own supply in some form. A corporation, a military base, an ocean, a city ordinance, a design board older than most homeowners. And most of them serve buyers who don't ask banks for permission. That's the complete formula. It isn't luck and it isn't magic. It's structure. And structure is exactly what the markets that fell the hardest never had. The honest closing is this. Nothing on this list is a permanent guarantee. A deep enough recession bends every market in the country. The entry price of these cities is itself a form of risk, because safety in California is a luxury good and it's priced like one. The 2008 crisis bent even the most protected markets, and never is a word for titles, not for contracts. But if you're asking where the structural floor runs deepest in California based on current data and identifiable protection factors, these 15 cities are the answer the data produces. Understanding why they held is more valuable than simply knowing that they did, because the same structural analysis applies to evaluating any market you're considering. That's the breakdown of 15 California cities that demonstrated price stability during a period of broader market decline and the specific structural factors behind that stability. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments which city surprised you most or which protection factor you think is most durable. And if you want more California housing market analysis with careful data and no hype, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next